I've been a prosecutor for 37 years, and 37 years I've never quarreled with a jury's verdict, and I'm not going to start today.
Sneddon said he had not talked with Jackson's accuser or his family after the verdicts were announced. He was then asked if he felt in retrospect he had put the wrong family on the witness stand.
People come in and they're the victims of crime. We don't select our victims, and we don't select the families they come from. What we do is we evaluate the case. We try to make a conscientious decision as to whether or not we have enough evidence to go forward. And that's what we did in this case.
That was the prosecutor in this case, Thomas Sneddon. Reporters also wanted to know if he would ever bring another case against Jackson, if someday another accuser stepped forward.
We review it like any other case we review in our office, just like we reviewed this one.
You wouldn't shy from it now?
Well, the answer to the question, truthfully, is I probably wouldn't if it was a good case. But I think we all learned some lessons here that we thought we had a good case this time.
What lessons have you learned?
Well, I was referring probably more than anything else to the celebrity factor.
In the end, was the jury swayed by the celebrity factor? They met with reporters as a group and answered that question point blank.
We all came in with our personal beliefs, and some of those did differ, but we spent a lot of time really seriously studying the evidence and looking at the testimony and the jury instructions, and obviously came to an agreement.
Tonight, we're going to try to answer these questions. Why did Michael Jackson walk free? We're going to look at what went wrong for the prosecution, what went right for the defense. And coming up next is California. Justice different for celebrities. Finally, what's next for Michael Jackson? With me now in Washington, senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. From Los Angeles tonight, Marcia Clark, who prosecuted O.J. Simpson, and Pamela Hayes, an attorney and former prosecutor here in New York, now a defense attorney. Good to have all three of you with us. Okay, trio, one of the things I heard a lawyer say this evening was the mother was smoking gun Exhibit A. Let's share with our audience what juror after juror had to say about the accuser's mother.
What mother in her right mind would allow that to happen, or you know, just freely volunteer your child, you know, to sleep with someone?
The mother, when she looked at me and snapped her fingers a few times and she says, you know how our culture is, and winks at me, I thought, no, that's not the way our culture is.
So Jeffrey Toobin, was this case lost for the prosecution the minute the accuser's mother took the witness stand?
Yes, and it didn't have to happen. The reason this woman was a central figure in the prosecution's case was that the government charged Jackson with conspiring to imprison her and her family. That charge was an albatross that destroyed this prosecution. If they had simply charged him with child molestation, the mother wouldn't even have been a prosecution witness. The case would have been half the length or less, and instead they made a terrible decision to bring a charge that Jackson was clearly innocent of, and it not only sunk that charge, but the rest of the case with it.
Marcia Clark, do you really think that Michael Jackson could be looking or would have been looking at prison time tonight down the road if the case had been streamlined and if the prosecutor had narrowed the charge to the molestation charge?
I have to say, no, I don't think it would have mattered, and I do have to say that I agree with Jeffrey. Absolutely. The conspiracy charge was something that many of us agreed should not have been filed. It was a weak charge. It was an unnecessary charge. These are difficult cases, Paula. Child molest cases are always very hard. And that made it that much harder because you're premising a felony count of conspiracy on the testimony of a witness who was a problem right from the start. This was no surprise. This was not something that jumped out of the box on the prosecution in the middle of trial. Right from the beginning, they knew she was a troublemaker, and she was not somebody that needed to be called without that conspiracy charge. So don't file the charge. However, having said all of that, and I don't think the charge should have been filed, and I don't think she should have been called, and I don't think it would have hurt the prosecution all that much if the defense had called her. Having said all of that, I still think Michael Jackson would have walked on this case. I don't think it would have made any difference, because I think celebrity trumps everything. everything. And I thought maybe it was something endemic only to Los Angeles. I now think that's just the way it is. His celebrity, I think, blocked out the sun. The jurors say no. I say they don't even realize subconsciously what an impact it has. Because what happens, Paula, is that a celebrity, especially of the magnitude of Michael Jackson, he's huge. He's huge. He's like 10 times bigger than O.J. Simpson ever was. Someone like that walks in and the jury feels like this heavy weight, this burden about convicting somebody this gigantic, and the burden of proof goes up to an impossible standard. Beyond a reasonable doubt becomes beyond all possible doubt. They're not even aware of it, I think, a lot of times. Some are not. And I think that's what happens, and I think that's why we got the acquittals, not because he wasn't proven.
Pam, you just heard what Marcia Clark had to say, and yet one of the jurors said quite forcefully, hogwash. We looked beyond that, and we looked at Michael Jackson like any other individual. Had he not been a celebrity, would he be looking at prison time tonight?
They would have never brought the charges. This was all a orchestration by the prosecutor.
So wait, so you're saying the charges were only filed because he was a celebrity?
Yeah.
So you're saying the exact opposite of what Marcia said?
Absolutely. The problem in this case was the mother and the complaining witness. They were both self-admitted liars. Once you have a witness that says, I'll lie under oath for money, it's all over. There isn't a jury in the world who's going to, help them to get on with their scheme to defraud Michael Jackson. I really felt that these people were self-admitted liars. They defrauded J.C. Penney. They came to court and said, yeah, we lied, and couldn't give an explanation why. And this woman had been doing this, the welfare fraud, and she's teaching this poor young man to do it. It was quite obvious. It had nothing to do with celebrity. They just wasn't going to accept the word of a liar.
I think everybody in our panel would agree tonight that that was a sloppy prosecution who didn't take on the warnings ahead of time that this woman is going to kill you during this trial, Jeffrey. But to what extent do you think Michael Jackson's celebrity did impact this case?
Boy, it's really hard to assign a value to it. It is true that that there were problems in this case for the prosecution beyond his celebrity. There was also the issue of chronology. Michael Jackson was accused of molesting this boy 2 years after he met him, 2 years after he had regular access to him, and only after the investigation of child molestation began. That's a peculiar set of facts.
What about that, Marcia? Because one of the jurors said that afterwards. She said it was very confusing. How are we to believe that this child will be molested 19 days after the actual cover-up began? Those were her words exactly.
I have to tell you, Paula, that in the very beginning of the case, when I realized what the timeline was, it was apparent to me that it was a time bomb ticking in the middle of the case to get the jury that could actually be very damaging, very devastating, because it's difficult for a jury to understand why, after this video came out and Michael Jackson is under so much scrutiny, he would do something like this when everybody's watching him. However, you have to also understand that someone who molests children, and in my opinion, he did molest this boy, I think that this kind of person doesn't think rationally, isn't thinking about how the world is watching, thinks on some level that is very different from ours, also a celebrity mentality about what they can get away with. I don't think you can assign those kind of logical conclusions and step one, step two to this kind of person.
Marcia, why are you so willing to believe this young man, a young boy who's been accused of lying multiple times by multiple witnesses, and his mother, who was accused, as Pamela said, as being a outright liar?
I'm not saying I believe the mother. I am saying, however, I believe the little boy. I've followed this case very carefully. I've been in court, and I have prosecuted child molest cases extensively and been involved in the handling of those cases a great deal. I have to tell you that putting all of it together, because I was not convinced in the very beginning of the case. I didn't know what had happened here, but putting it all together, and with my experience in the kind of conduct child molesters engage in, the pattern of conduct I saw in the evidence in this case, putting all of it together and looking at it realistically based on my experience, that is why I believe that it was true. However, that is my opinion. The jury did not share it, and I think that celebrity had a great impact on that. Yes, there were problems with the case, but I think that celebrity makes the jury use those problems as an excuse, and they'll seize on anything. In this case, they had a lot to seize on, and that was, I think, also a part of the decision.
Pam, were you troubled by the fact that defense attorney Mesereau promised that Michael Jackson would testify and then he never ended up calling him to testify?
I didn't interpret it like that. I found a lot of analysts thought that's what he promised.
Well, what did you think?
He said you will hear from Michael Jackson. He played the videos. They played the outtakes, different things like that. He never said he'll take the stand. I thought he knew from the very beginning Michael Jackson would never take the stand. So what we have to do is just look at it and say, hey, this is not what he promised them.
Final thought tonight, Jeffrey Toobin?
Well, I guess the biggest surprise to me was the way the jury didn't buy the pattern evidence, the evidence of prior molestation, which in many respects I thought was stronger than the evidence against the case that was brought. The fact that Jackson had been accused of this repeatedly seemed very powerfully to suggest that he had done it again. Jury didn't care. They concentrated on this particular case, and this particular case was weak.
Jeffrey, Marcia, Pam, thank you to all three of you for joining us tonight. Appreciate all of your perspectives. Just ahead, what's next for Michael Jackson? I'll ask a man who's known him for 35 years. In addition to that, we'll be checking in with the foreman of the jury who came to this verdict this afternoon. In fact, I am told we have that juror with us right now, Mr. Rodriguez. Paul Rodriguez joins us now. Hi, sir. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine, thanks. Our audience that's watching right now probably didn't have the opportunity to hear the news conference you all held shortly after the verdict. Was there one particular issue that had you hung up in deliberations?
Well, there was conspiracy for one. There was no really set dates. It was just a time frame that they gave us. Also, the molestation towards the end, we thought maybe it really, how could it have happened? You know, we didn't have set dates, and so those are a couple of things that we were hung up on.
So the timeline, do you think, was confusing to everybody on the jury?
Not really confusing. It just didn't seem accurate. It just didn't seem like it was fitting in with some of the other things that were going on at the same time.
Did you find it hard to believe personally that any alleged molestation took place 2 years, allegedly, after Michael Jackson met this accuser?
Yes, we did.
And then
we just didn't think it...
oh, please carry on, Mr. Rodriguez.
Go ahead.
Well, another thing, one of the other jurors said tonight that she was troubled by the fact that you were supposed to believe that somehow the molestation started 19 days after the cover-up. Was that a hard thing for you to get a grasp of?
Yeah, we all felt the same way. Literally, we just felt the same way.
Another thing that became very clear tonight was that it seemed that the jury was very offended by the accuser's mother. One complained that the accuser's mother snapped at her. Another one of your fellow jury members complained that she didn't like the way that the accuser's mother looked at her. And then another juror said simply she felt uncomfortable about her testimony. How much did the mother's accuser, you think, hurt the prosecution's case?
Well, she just came on too strong with the jury, and she just was trying to make eye contact with individuals in the jury box and trying to convince us that her story was the only story. And then also when she would say things that she wasn't sure about hearing about any of this thing until today, sitting there in the witness box, the things were happening as they were unfolding right there in the jury, you know, in the courtroom. So we just couldn't buy her story completely. It just didn't add up, if you want to put it that way.
There are a lot of people very troubled by that, though. They thought, okay, maybe the mother's story didn't add up, but that they felt that at least the young accuser's story should have held more water. What do you think of that? Could you not separate the two?
Well, we could separate them to a certain degree, but also his siblings, when they testified, there was a lot of conflicting information that they were giving out that just didn't put anything together that we could say, okay, yes, they're pinpointing it down for us to really look at this, but they weren't doing that. There was two conflicting stories is what it amounted to from all of them.
So did you
They didn't have the same story.
Yeah, so did you buy any part of the prosecution's closing argument where basically you were being told, look, this is a young boy who was under a tremendous amount of stress, taking stress from all sides, from his family, from the judicial system, you know, cut him some slack. Even in a normal case with less pressure, a child might get confused in testimony, even though his testimony was taped.
You know, I'd rather not talk about that at the moment. There's just some things that you just said that I'd rather not say it right now. So if you can ask something else.
Are you, without my digging too far, able to tell me what makes you uncomfortable about that? Is it something that you don't want the public to know?
Well, no, it's just that we had decided inside the jury, well, in the area where they had us not sequestered, but where we had our private thoughts, that we wouldn't elaborate or say too much about this case until we had a chance to absorb it ourselves and maybe have a chance to think about this, to see how we're going to handle this in the next few days. And I haven't even had a chance to go home. I was caught up here in the whole thing. So that's why I say I just would like to give it some time to think about this.
Can you tell me if you have any empathy for this young man, Michael Jackson's accuser?
Yes, yes, I do have some empathy for him because he was brought up, I think, in an environment where he was taught to lie, and he just didn't have a really chance to express himself as a normal child would do, and so I think the mother just had a lot of influence on him all the way through their youth.
Did you believe anything this young man had to say in his testimony?
It was hard to do. It was really hard to believe what he was telling us. Like I said, there was too much conflicting information coming out from the other siblings as to what the mother was also saying. And also we felt if they had brought in some other witnesses, I won't say which side, but just brought in some other witnesses, that would have been a little more reliable and collaborated the stories that they had, it would have helped out a lot.
It's interesting that you said that because one of your fellow jury members did say that among the most credible witnesses they heard during the trial were Kiki, Michael Jackson's housekeeper, and her son Jesus, who alleged that in some kind of tickling encounter with Michael Jackson, some molestation happened. This juror making us believe during this news conference that's something that at least she found credible. Did you believe the testimony of those two witnesses?
Up to a certain point, it was just for the matter of finding the facts that we were looking for, and so we had to give them some credit, or a lot of credit, because we felt that they were probably closer than so many of the other witnesses that they brought forth for us to listen to and to use their testimony for whatever reasons, and we just felt they were more credible.
Are you troubled by the fact that Michael Jackson has shared his bed with so many young boys over the years?
Say that again?
Are you troubled by the fact that Michael Jackson has allowed young boys in his bed over the years and has talked about it openly? He did so in an ABC documentary.
Yes, we were very troubled by that. But again, as instructed by the judge, we had to stick to the facts of the case. We couldn't use our beliefs or our personal thoughts as to how this thing should end up. So we stuck to the facts, and that's how we based the whole case. How we decided that what we came up with was the final verdict, the final decision.
And you found Michael Jackson not guilty on all 10 counts. In spite of that verdict, what is it that you hope Michael Jackson has learned through this process?
Well, we would hope, first of all, that he doesn't sleep with children anymore, and that he learns that they have to stay with their families or stay in the guest rooms or the houses, whatever they're called down there. And he just has to be careful how he conducts himself around children.
Final question for you. Now that you're getting your first night off in a long, long time, what do you plan to do now that you no longer have this heavy responsibility on your shoulders?
Well, my wife and I planned to take a trip somewhere, and we were planning on moving out of the area, so we sold our home, so we'll see what happens in the near future.
Well,
but we would like a little privacy down the road somewhere. You know, it's going to be hard to do for the next few days, I'm sure.
Well, I wish you luck in hiding from all of us, the jury foreman in the Michael Jackson case. Thank you very much for joining us tonight and giving us a much better understanding of how you arrived at the verdict you did. Still ahead tonight, a key witness for the prosecution will be joining us and giving us her reaction to the verdict.
When the defendant not
A big question tonight, of course, is how Michael Jackson is doing after the ordeal of the trial and the joy of his acquittal on all charges, although he didn't show that as he left the courtroom today. With me here, Jackson's friend and former spokesman Steve Manning. Good to see you.
Good evening. It's a great night for everybody, for the Jackson family tonight.
I know you feel that way tonight, but you had some strong concerns that it might not end up this way.
Yes, that's very true.
What was it that scared you the most? Was there a particular testimony that had you believing the jury would go another way?
The media was really having him arrested and executed, already handcuffed already, and say you're guilty for weeks and weeks now, and that was very frightening for the whole family.
I don't think you were watching this show because we never did that on your show.
Other show. I'm not going to mention that network, no, but a lot of TV shows in the media, electronic and print, were saying this guy is guilty, sent him away, he's already dead and buried, lock him up for 18 years.
But you know the jury wasn't supposed to watch the coverage of this trial. In the end, even they said at the news conference tonight, even a woman who was married to a reporter said we didn't listen to this
It's been a great victory for the family. Mrs. Jackson has said on many occasions, including last night, her baby, she called Michael, my baby, I want to see him walk out that courtroom today or whenever the verdict comes down as a free man and put this all behind him, start his life over again. So thank God for that victory today, the jury.
I know you didn't have the opportunity to talk with Michael today, but you spoke with him last night. You just mentioned you spoke with his mother.
Well, through the background, Mrs. Jackson background, says, Steve, thank you for your support and your loyalty. He was very afraid, by the way. The whole family was very concerned, the fact that he had been sleeping and hadn't been eating. As you know, he looked very gaunt like that, and it was very stressful. It recalls a couple years ago when Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, was under trial, and he lost a lot of weight. It's not a very easy situation to be accused waiting for that verdict to come down. You're not going to, your future's all in the hands of 12 people. Your future's right in the hands there.
What did Michael Jackson tell you last night in the last conversation you had in advance of this day that could completely change the
fight? Well, in the background, was talking to his mom, and he said, Steve, thank you for your support. But they were worried about him because he had been sleeping and just very nervous. He was, imagine a whole weekend waiting for the verdict, another 48 hours, another weekend to wait for a verdict. I mean, that was very stressful for him.
But what did Michael tell you?
Well, that he was, in the past conversation we talked, he said, you know, Steve, I am guilty. I mean, I'm innocent. I was there in Las Vegas a year and a half ago when he was arrested. Hours before he got arrested, and he said, Steve, I didn't do this, you know me for a long time, I'm innocent, and I want to get this over with. So it became very stressful for him as weeks went by and a testimonial, and he felt people were lying on him. They were like not telling the truth. A lot of people came to the stand for the prosecution.
But you're a close friend of his, and allegations like this surfaced in the 90s. It wasn't just the accuser in this trial, specific charges from the housekeeper and her son, and some charges that came later, some of those refuted, but the fact is you've heard a pattern of these allegations. As a friend, what did you tell Michael Jackson?
Well, again, these things are not true. The jury spoke today. I did tell him that the allegations, I thought that the fact that the perception of a grown man sleeping with children wasn't a good thing. And I think the jury didn't believe it today, thank God. I mean, he's been a very kind humanitarian person for many, many years.
Well, they believe the fact that they think that's unusual and it's wrong for a grown man to sleep with children, and Foreman just told us
apparently the jury believed it, nothing happened. I mean, it might have been inappropriate. The perception was very bad.
So how much responsibility do you think Michael Jackson has for bringing a lot on himself through his behavior?
Well, Michael is a very, very trusting individual, a human being, true trusting. And I think now that the verdict's behind him, he's going to put his things into perspective and put things back together. Start his music career. L.A. Reid might sign him from, Def Jam Island Music, might give him a contract.
L.A. Reid's coming on our show a little bit later tonight to talk about that.
A lot of people say, oh, this man is dead, he's finished, but he's going to rise up again from the ashes like a phoenix and be big in bed, I believe.
But will he change his behavior so he doesn't leave himself open to the kind of accusations?
He's not going to be trusting again to a lot of people who he was before in the past. Too trusting, too trustworthy with people. That's not going to happen anymore with him.
But you don't want him to invite young men into his home, do you, and sleep with them and share a bed?
As a guest. I mean, Neverland is a wonderful place. People love Neverland as a grown woman. It's a wonderful place. But I think now he'll realize that it looks wrong. He won't do it anymore, I believe, personally.
And did his family along the way say, Michael, you know, we don't believe what they're saying about you, but just stop living that way, and maybe you could protect yourself better?
True. Allegations, again, there were allegations. Kids come there. They haven't mentioned the fact that when people have children who are terminally ill, they might come there and see the movie theater. There's a bed there. I mean, this guy's giving millions of dollars away to charity, first of all. He's opened his home up to different events and that, and never talked about it. He felt very hurt about that. He felt that they were really lynching him in a way like that, the press and the public. They were being unfair to him.
Do you think the United States or the American public will ever accept Michael Jackson like they once did?
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Now this is behind him. Yes, they certainly will. He's found innocent. A court of law, United States of America. Thank God for that.
And we thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Paula. Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank you.
your time. Michael Jackson's acquittal is a clean sweep for the defense and a disastrous defeat for the prosecution. Let's look at what went wrong from the prosecution perspective. Joining me now from Santa Maria, former Santa Barbara County Prosecutor Craig Smith, and from Los Angeles, prosecution witness Louise Palanker. Good to see both of you. So, Mr. Smith, we've talked a lot about the jury having some huge problems with the accuser's mother. In the end, what do you think was the single biggest mistake the prosecution made above and beyond using her as a key witness?
I think the single biggest mistake they made was the decision to charge conspiracy. Conspiracy made it necessary to rely to a great deal on the testimony of the accuser's mother. And the accuser's mother was just a horrible witness. She was over-emotional, she was overwrought, she was over the top. As the jurors' comments in the press conference this afternoon indicated, they were completely turned off by her. And indeed, the bottom line, of course, the decision to charge conspiracy complicated what should have been a simple molestation case. It brought the accuser's mother into the forefront, and the accuser's mother tainted and poisoned the rest of the case. The prosecution opened themselves up to the criticism by the jury that if they were so wrong in their theory about the conspiracy, then could you really trust them on their theory about the molestation?
But Ms. Palanker, do you really think that Michael Jackson would have been found guilty if the charges had been streamlined just to the molestation charge and getting rid of the conspiracy charge altogether?
I don't think I'm in a position to second-guess the prosecution's case. I think they had strong evidence for a conspiracy. I was called by the mother in a panic when she felt that she was being held by what she referred to as evil people in the middle of the chaotic incidents that ensued following the airing of the Bashir documentary. So it felt like the conspiracy was real to me from my own personal experience.
Why do you believe the mother when so many of the jurors told us tonight that they didn't like the way she looked at them, didn't like the way she snapped her fingers at them, and they viewed her as an out and outright liar? Those weren't their exact words, but clearly when you listen to the sum total of what they said tonight, they did not believe her.
I think we're talking about a woman who's been in survival mode for all of her adult life, and I don't think that she knows of any other way to conduct herself or to make herself heard. I think she feels like a person who has not been heard for most of her life, and there's a little desperation that goes along with that type of personality, and I think that's how she came across. She's an extremely excitable woman.
Do you think that a child molester was set free tonight, Ms. Palanker?
That's what I believe, because this boy is my friend, and I believe him. I come to you with a bias. I am friends with the young accuser, and I believe what he has told me. So, yes.
Craig, it's interesting to note that one of the jurors said tonight during the news conference that among the most credible witnesses the prosecution put forward were Michael Jackson's housekeeper and her son, who alleged there was a tickling incident with Michael Jackson that led to child molestation. They apparently found that testimony credible, which was relating an incident that happened in the 90s, but certainly not the testimony of this latest accuser. Where's the disconnect there?
Well, the disconnect is that when you present evidence of prior sexual offenses, the idea is that where there's smoke, there's fire. If he did it before, he's likely to have done it this time. And of course, from a very technical standpoint, the quantum of evidence they need to believe that the prior incident occurred is preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not. To find Michael Jackson guilty of the charged offense, they need to find proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And because of all the problems with the accuser's mother and the fact that there was no corroboration for what the accuser said, either in the form of physical evidence or in the testimony of other witnesses, the jury didn't have that abiding conviction to a moral certainty that we call beyond a reasonable doubt.
Ms. Palanker, do you think Michael Jackson is a free man tonight, in part because of his celebrity?
Well, I would just be speculating if I had an opinion about that, but it certainly seems as if this man lived on your street or my street, that he would have been convicted. So yes, it seems that way to me, but I wasn't in the jury room and I wasn't in court every day. I was only in court the day I testified, so I have a very limited scope in terms of my view of what they saw and what they felt that the judge had instructed them to do. And what they felt that they needed to do was up to them, and I'm not going to question their decision.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Snedden made it quite clear in an answer and a non-answer to a follow-up question that he believes that perhaps celebrity is something that they either I would say underestimated in this case. How much of an impact do you think it had on the outcome?
It definitely had an impact. You can't underestimate the impact of celebrity. Number one, the fact that he's a celebrity and he has wealth means that he's able to marshal a formidable defense. That's not something every defendant can do. And once again, you know, we live in a cult of celebrity. The governor of this state that we live in is elected probably due to his celebrity. So that just spills over into so many areas of life. And once again, it makes Tom Mesereau's argument that the accuser and his family, they are grifters, they are looking for a big payday, they are looking for a deep pocket. Being a celebrity provides that deep pocket.
Final question for you, Mr. Smith. Do you think this will have a chilling effect on filing potentially of other child molestation cases in this country?
It may have a chilling effect, but once again, it's only really going to have a chilling effect when it's celebrity on the other end, or a celebrity on the other end. In the everyday case, I don't think it's going to have that large an impact. I think it's going to be business as usual.
Craig Smith, Louise Palanker, thank you both for joining us after a very long day that you have jointly endured here.
Thank you.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson says Michael Jackson was acquitted in the courtroom, but he's been convicted in newsrooms all across the country. He'll be joining us coming up right after this break. The charges against Michael Jackson go all the way back to the TV documentary called Living with Michael Jackson, in which he's seen holding hands with a boy who would later become his accuser. Jackson, of course, was accused of molesting the boy and trying to hold him and his family captive to get them to rebut the damaging images in the documentary. Take a look at part of that tape as journalist Martin Bashir interviews Jackson about having boys in his bed.
Is that really appropriate for a man, a grown man, to be doing that? How do you respond to that?
I feel sorry for them because that's judging someone who wants to really help people. Why can't you share your bed? The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone.
Joining us now from Chicago, Michael Jackson's spiritual advisor, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Always good to see you, sir. Welcome. In spite of the fact that Michael Jackson was acquitted of all the charges, how troubled are you that over the years he has invited young men into his home and shared a bed with them?
I'm deeply concerned, but you had these two trials. The newsroom dealt with appearance, and dealt with innuendo and suggestion. But the jurors had to deal with fact and evidence. And so you had two trials. And so it did not appear to be a good thing. But the impropriety appearance is not illegal. And that is where it seemed to me that the distinction came out today.
So what do you think the lesson is that Michael Jackson has learned from this?
One should be that the very appearance of impropriety is dangerous and high risk. He should never again put himself in that predicament, because really it really is unacceptable behavior, and it should not happen. But the question for the jury was, he crossed that legal line of impropriety to become illegal, and they said on all 10 counts not. So we have to respect the deliberation of this jury.
In one of the more unusual exchanges tonight, one of the jurors, who happened to be a mother, was asked if she was troubled by the very fact that Michael Jackson had shared a bed with these young men, and she said she found that deeply troubling. So did other jurors. But then she went on to say, and would completely answer the question, that in many ways she felt the mother was more responsible than Michael Jackson. Those weren't her exact words, but in a follow-up question she wouldn't answer. That's what you, as a listener, were led to believe.
Well, you know, one of the things here is that many people began to feel that the mother was a part of a setup, that you'd have these testimonies against Michael. Upon cross-examination, there was always some stench of a money trail and the mother's behavior, as if they were part of some conspiracy to set him up. The jury detected that themselves. Michael always declared it was the case, and the jury at some point believed Michael more than they believed them.
Did you believe anything the young accuser had to say?
Well, I learned not to. Upon hearing the accusation, it seemed very aggravating and very disturbing. And I would always wait for the cross-examination, and in each instance, on the cross-examination, they wilted, and you found these ulterior motives in the process. Now, Michael obviously contended there was some financial challenge. There was the real bigger picture. He felt that his catalog ownership of the Beatles and Elvis and his own, that there were forces trying to get that. And at some point, there was a case where his assets were much greater than his debt, and there was an attempt to foreclose. That got resolved in the middle of April. It kind of came back to these witnesses and this mother and Michael. And in that scenario, jurors believed more in Michael's defense than they did in the accusers and the mother.
We just listened to Michael Jackson talking in the Martin Bashir documentary, and it almost sounded like he didn't understand that there wasn't something wrong about sharing his bed with young men. And I'm just curious, in all your conversations with Michael Jackson, if he's ever conceded that his actions led to what he faced over the last couple of months in the courtroom.
I mean, there is a certain social disconnect about the boy staying over. But in Michael's own kind of innocence, you know, the author of We Are the World, Neverland Ranch is for free for the children. And children pictures all over his Neverland Ranch. And I want to build a Neverland type place in Africa. Those children do not have a theme park there. It seems that Michael is in a certain plane. You might call it abnormal, you might call it bizarre. It may be all of that, but it was not illegal. And when the case came down to facts and evidence, the jurors determined that to be their collective point of view as well. So now Michael must get on with avoiding such appearance ever again, get on with his own physical healing, emotional healing, as well as on with his career.
Michael Jackson isn't talking to us personally. What do you suspect he'd want the American public to know right now? I know you made it very clear earlier today, there was no gloating on his part, that this was a sad day all the way around for all of the people caught up in this trial.
Well, you know, he's anxious. He felt a sense of betrayal about those that he had been generous toward, testifying to put them in jail, but he never felt like embittered toward them. Even though there was a very hostile political environment there with the sheriff and the DA and the jurors coming from that county, he never raised the issue about no African American being on the jury. He trusted that jury and those common people. He trusted Tom Mesereau, and he held fast to the conviction that if they used a standard of reasonable doubt, he would be vindicated. Now, if it became political, he felt he might lose, in the sense that the jury was never sequestered.
Sure.
And given how many journalists there were in the area, and how many concluded Michael was guilty, there was a fear that they might be affected by those conclusions. Indeed, Nancy Grace, indeed, O'Reilly, and others of them, but somehow that jury arrived at the conclusion much more sober than the pundits.
Reverend Jackson, we got to leave it there this evening. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank
Always
you very
enjoy
much.
having you on. Michael Jackson's last album was called Invincible. He may seem like that today, but what's ahead for his career, his empire, and his music? Stay with us as we search for some answers.
As a mother, to the values and stuff that she has taught them and they've learned, and that is really hard for me to comprehend, you know, because I wouldn't want any of my children to lie for their own gain. I don't know, it's hard.